The pain was unbearable. I screamed as I felt the stick hit my eye. Everything went dark on my left side. I could hear people shouting and running around me. My heart was beating so fast, I thought it might jump out of my chest. "Amina, Amina," I heard my best friend Zainab's voice. She sounded scared. "Someone call the nurse. Hurry." I tried to open my eyes, but only my right eye would open. The left one felt swollen and hurt so much. I was lying on the ground of our school's football field. How did I end up here? What just happened? My name is Amina and I'm 15 years old. I go to Sunshine Secondary School in Lagos, Nigeria. This is the story of how I lost my left eye and how it changed my life forever. It all started 3 months ago on a hot Monday morning. I woke up excited because it was the first day of a new school year. I was now in Senior Secondary 2, SS2, which is like 11th grade in some other countries. I put on my green and white school uniform, brushed my long black hair into a neat ponytail, and ate my breakfast of akara and pap that my mom made. "Amina, hurry up or you'll be late," my mom called from the kitchen. "Coming, Mom," I shouted back, grabbing my school bag and running out the door. I met Zainab at our usual spot on the corner of our street. We've been best friends since we were little kids. Zainab is tall and funny, always making jokes and laughing. I'm shorter and more serious, but we balance each other out perfectly. "Ready for another boring year?" Zainab asked, grinning. I rolled my eyes. "Come on, it won't be that bad. Maybe we'll have some cute new boys in our class this year." Zainab laughed. "Yeah, right, like any of the boys at our school are worth looking at." We chatted and giggled all the way to school. When we got there, we saw a crowd gathered around the notice board. Everyone was pushing and shoving, trying to see the class lists. "Let's check which class we're in," I said, pulling Zainab towards the crowd. We squeezed through until we could see the lists. I scanned the names quickly, looking for ours. My heart sank when I saw that Zainab and I had been placed in different classes. "Oh no," Zainab said, her face falling. "We're not together this year." I felt disappointed too, but I tried to cheer her up. "It's okay. We'll still see each other during breaks and after school." Just then, I heard a deep voice behind me. "Excuse me, can I see the list?" I turned around and my breath caught in my throat. Standing there was the most handsome boy I had ever seen. He was tall, with dark skin, kind brown eyes, and a dazzling smile. I felt my cheeks get hot and knew I was blushing. Sure," I stammered, stepping aside so he could see the list. He looked at it for a moment, then turned to me with that amazing smile. "Looks like we're in the same class. I'm Akin. What's your name?" Amina," I managed to say. "Nice to meet you, Amina. See you in class." He waved and walked away. I stood there, staring after him like an idiot. Zainab elbowed me in the ribs. "Earth to Amina, who was that fine boy?" I shook my head, trying to clear it. "His name is Akin. He's new, I think, and he's in my class." Zainab whistled. "Lucky you. Maybe this year won't be so boring after all." I laughed, but inside my stomach was doing flip-flops. I had never felt this way about a boy before. Was this what it felt like to have a crush? The bell rang and we all headed to our classrooms. I said goodbye to Zainab and went to find my new class. When I walked in, I saw Akin sitting near the back. He smiled and waved at me. I waved back, feeling shy. I was about to go sit next to him when someone stuck out their foot and tripped me. I fell hard, my books scattering across the floor. Everyone laughed. I looked up to see who had tripped me. It was Fatima, the meanest girl in our school. She was beautiful, with light skin and long straight hair, but she had an ugly personality. She always picked on people she thought were beneath her. "Watch where you're going, ugly," Fatima sneered. I felt tears stinging my eyes as I started to pick up my books. Suddenly, a hand appeared in front of me. It was Akin. He helped me up and glared at Fatima. That wasn't nice, he said firmly. Apologize to Amina. Fatima looked shocked. No one had ever stood up to her before. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Finally, she muttered a quick, sorry, and turned away. Akin helped me gather the rest of my books. Are you okay? He asked, his eyes full of concern. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. We sat down together just as our teacher walked in. As the teacher started talking about the new school year, I couldn't stop thinking about what had just happened. Akin had stood up for me. He was nice and handsome and in my class. Maybe this year would be amazing after all. But I had no idea then how wrong I was. I didn't know that my crush on Akin would lead to jealousy, betrayal, and eventually the loss of my eye. If I had known what was coming, maybe I could have stopped it. But that's not how life works. We don't get to see the future. We just have to live it one day at a time and hope for the best. The first few weeks of school flew by. Akin and I became good friends. We sat together in class, ate lunch together, and sometimes studied in the library after school. He was smart and funny, always making me laugh with his silly jokes. Zainab teased me constantly about my boyfriend, but I kept telling her Akin and I were just friends. Deep down, though, I hoped we might become more than that someday. But not everyone was happy about my friendship with Akin. Fatima glared at me whenever she saw us together. She started spreading rumors about me, saying I was desperate and throwing myself at Akin. Some people believed her and started whispering behind my back. One day, about a month into the school year, I was walking to class when I overheard Fatima talking to her friends. That ugly Amina thinks she has a chance with Akin, Fatima was saying. As if he'd ever be interested in someone like her. I'm going to teach her a lesson she won't forget. I hurried away, my heart pounding. What did Fatima mean? What was she planning to do? I wanted to tell someone, but who would believe me? Fatima's father was rich and important. She always got away with her bullying because no one wanted to get on her bad side. I decided to keep quiet and just try to avoid Fatima as much as possible. But it wasn't easy. She seemed to be everywhere, watching me with cold, calculating eyes. Things came to a head a week later. We were having a big football match against our rival school. Everyone was excited, even those of us who didn't usually care about sports. Akin was on our school team, and I was looking forward to cheering him on. The day of the match was hot and sunny. The whole school gathered on the football field, shouting and clapping as our team ran out. I spotted Akin easily. He looked so handsome in his football uniform. The game was intense. Both teams were evenly matched, and the score kept going back and forth. By the last few minutes, we were tied 2-2. Akin had the ball. He was running towards the goal, dodging players left and right. The crowd was on their feet, screaming encouragement. I was yelling so loud my throat hurt. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a player from the other team tackled Akin hard. He went down, clutching his leg. The referee blew his whistle and ran over. Everyone was talking at once. Was Akin okay? Would he be able to continue? Our team huddled around him as he slowly got to his feet. He limped a little but nodded to the coach. He was staying in the game. There were only 2 minutes left. Akin got the ball again. Despite his injury, he was determined to score. He kicked the ball with all his might. Time seemed to slow down as the ball soared through the air. The other team's goalkeeper jumped, his fingers just grazing the ball. But it wasn't enough. The ball hit the back of the net. The crowd went wild. We had won. Everyone ran onto the field, cheering and hugging each other. I was jumping up and down, so happy I thought I might burst. I saw Akin in the middle of a group of teammates. They were patting him on the back, ruffling his hair. He looked up and our eyes met. He grinned and waved at me. I waved back, beaming. I started to make my way towards him through the crowd, but before I could reach him, someone grabbed my arm roughly. It was Fatima. Her eyes were blazing with anger. "Stay away from Akin," she hissed. "He's mine." I tried to pull away, but her grip was too strong. "Let go of me," I said. "You're hurting me." Fatima laughed, an ugly sound. "You haven't felt hurt yet," she said, "but you will." She shoved me hard. I stumbled backwards, tripping over someone's foot. As I fell, I saw something coming towards my face. It was a stick swinging fast. Then came the pain, horrible, blinding pain in my left eye. I screamed and everything went dark. And that brings us back to where we started. Me lying on the ground, my eye throbbing, people shouting all around me. I felt someone take my hand. It was Zainab. "Amina, can you hear me? The nurse is coming. You're going to be okay." But I knew I wasn't going to be okay. Something was very wrong with my eye. I could feel warm liquid running down my face. Was it tears or blood? I heard sirens in the distance getting closer. Someone must have called an ambulance. Everything was confusing and scary. I wanted my mom and dad. "What happened?" I heard a man's voice ask. Must be a teacher. "She fell," Fatima's voice said innocently. "It was an accident." I wanted to shout that she was lying, that she had done this to me on purpose. But the pain was too much. I couldn't speak. The next few hours were a blur. The ambulance ride, the bright lights of the hospital, doctors examining me, talking in low, serious voices. When I finally fully woke up, I was in a hospital bed. My parents were there, looking worried and tired. "Mom? Dad?" My voice sounded strange and weak. They both jumped up. "Amina, oh, thank God you're awake," my mom said, squeezing my hand. "What happened? How long have I been here?" I asked. My dad's face was grim. "You've been here for 2 days, sweetheart. You had a bad injury to your left eye. The doctors, they did everything they could, but..." He trailed off, looking helpless. My mom was crying silently. A cold fear gripped my heart. "What? What is it?" A doctor came in then. He looked at my parents, then at me. "Amina," he said gently, "I'm very sorry, but we couldn't save your left eye. The damage was too severe. We had to remove it to prevent infection from spreading." I felt like all the air had been sucked out of the room. This couldn't be happening. It had to be a nightmare. I'd wake up any second now, right? But it wasn't a nightmare. It was real. I had lost my eye. The next few weeks were the hardest of my life. I had to stay in the hospital for a while to recover from the surgery. When I was finally allowed to look in a mirror, I barely recognized myself. A big white bandage covered the left side of my face. After the accident, everything felt different. When my parents brought me my schoolwork, I just stared at the pages. I couldn't focus. All I could think about was my missing eye and how strange I looked now. Sometimes I would touch the bandage on my face and wonder, why did this happen to me? What if I never feel normal again? There were days when I felt like crying all the time. I missed my old life, the way things used to be. But then, there were other days when I told myself, I can get through this. I'm still Amina. I'm still strong. I would look at the mirror and say, this doesn't change who I am. I can be brave. It was hard, but little by little, I started to believe it. Zainab visited me every day after school. She told me what was happening at Sunshine Secondary. Apparently, everyone was talking about my accident. Fatima was telling anyone who would listen that I had tripped and fallen on a stick. Some people believed her, but others were suspicious. Akin doesn't believe her, Zainab told me one day. He keeps asking about you. He wants to visit, but the hospital only allows family right now. I felt a little spark of happiness at that, but it quickly faded. Would Akin still want to be my friend when he saw what I looked like now? Finally, After 3 weeks, I was allowed to go home. The doctors had fitted me with a glass eye, but it didn't look quite right. It didn't move like a real eye, and the color was a bit off. The day I was supposed to return to school, I stood in front of my mirror, trying to gather my courage. I looked different now. My left eye didn't blink. When I turned my head, only my right eye moved. Would everyone stare at me? Would they whisper and point? My mom knocked on my door. "Amina, are you ready?" I took a deep breath. "Yes, Mom, I'm coming." The walk to school felt like it took forever. People on the street did double takes when they saw me. A little kid pointed and asked his mother loudly, "What's wrong with that girl's eye?" By the time we reached the school gates, I was ready to turn around and run back home. But then I saw Zainab waiting for me. She ran up and hugged me tight. "You look great," she said firmly. "Don't let anyone tell you differently." With Zainab by my side, I walked into the school. Everyone went quiet as we passed. I could feel their eyes on me. Some looked shocked, others pitying, a few even looked scared. When we got to my classroom, Akin was there. He stood up when he saw me, his eyes wide. I held my breath, waiting for his reaction. He walked over slowly. "Amina," he said softly. "I'm so glad you're back. How are you feeling?" I felt tears welling up in my good eye. "I'm okay," I managed to say. Akin smiled at me, the same warm smile I remembered. "You're still beautiful," he said. "Don't ever forget that." In that moment, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe things would be okay after all. But my hope didn't last long. As I sat down at my desk, I heard Fatima's voice from the back of the room. "You, look at the freak," she stage whispered to her friends. They giggled meanly. I hunched down in my seat, trying to disappear. This was going to be harder than I thought. The next few months were a struggle. Some days were better than others. My true friends, like Zainab and Akin, stuck by me, but many others avoided me, as if my missing eye was contagious. Fatima's bullying got worse. She and her friends would make pirate jokes when I walked by. They'd cover one eye and say, "Ah," like it was the funniest thing ever. I tried to ignore them, but it hurt. Every nasty comment, every stare, every whisper behind my back. It all chipped away at my confidence. One day, about 2 months after I returned to school, I started feeling like something bad was going to happen. Fatima had been giving me mean looks all week, and I felt nervous every time I saw her. My stomach would twist into knots, and I kept looking over my shoulder, afraid she might do something. That afternoon, I went to the girls' bathroom to wash my hands. The room was quiet, and I was all alone. But then, just as I turned to leave, I heard the door creak open. My heart started racing. It was Fatima and her friends, and they all looked at me with those same cold, mean eyes. "Well, well," Fatima said, smirking, "if it isn't our little Cyclops." I tried to leave, but they blocked the door. "Where are you going?" Fatima asked, her voice sickly sweet. "We just want to talk." I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. "Please let me pass. I don't want any trouble." Fatima laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the bathroom tiles. "Trouble? You are trouble, Amina. You should have stayed away from Akin like I told you to. Now look at you." My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. "What are you talking about? You did this to me on purpose?" "Of course I did, you idiot," Fatima sneered. "Did you really think it was an accident? I warned you to stay away from Akin, but you didn't listen, so I had to teach you a lesson." I felt like I couldn't breathe. All this time, I had suspected Fatima was behind my injury, but hearing her admit it was different, it made it real. "You're lying," I said, but my voice was shaky. "You can't have meant to take my eye." Fatima shrugged, examining her perfectly manicured nails. Maybe I didn't mean for it to go that far, but you know what? I'm glad it did. Now everyone can see how ugly you really are. Something snapped inside me. All the pain, all the fear, all the anger I'd been holding back for months came rushing out. Before I knew what I was doing, I lunged at Fatima. We went down in a tangle of limbs, scratching and pulling hair. Fatima's friends were yelling, some cheering her on, others trying to pull us apart. I don't know how long we fought. It could have been minutes or hours. All I knew was that I wanted to hurt Fatima as much as she had hurt me. Suddenly, I heard a familiar voice shouting over the chaos. "Stop! Stop right now!" It was Mrs. Adeyemi, our school principal. She pulled us apart, her face red with anger. "What is the meaning of this?" she demanded. "Amina, Fatima, explain yourselves." We both started talking at once, our words tumbling over each other. Mrs. Adeyemi held up her hand, silencing us. "Not here," she said firmly. "Both of you to my office, now." As we walked to the principal's office, I could feel everyone staring at us. My uniform was torn, my hair a mess. Fatima didn't look much better. She had a scratch on her cheek that was starting to bleed. In Mrs. Adeyemi's office, we sat in separate chairs, not looking at each other. The principal stared at us for a long moment before speaking. "I am very disappointed in both of you," she said. "Fighting is strictly against school rules. Now, one at a time, tell me what happened." I spoke first, my words coming out in a rush. I told Mrs. Adeyemi everything. How Fatima had bullied me, how she had just admitted to causing my eye injury on purpose. Fatima interrupted, her voice shrill. "She's lying. I never said that. She attacked me for no reason." Mrs. Adeyemi held up her hand again. "Fatima, you will have your turn to speak. Amina, do you have any proof of what you're saying?" My heart sank. Of course I didn't have proof. It was just my word against Fatima's. And Fatima's family was rich and powerful. Who would believe me over her? But then I remembered something. My hand went to my pocket, feeling the shape of my phone. With shaking fingers, I pulled it out. I think I might have proof," I said quietly. Both Mrs. Adeyemi and Fatima looked at me in surprise. "What do you mean?" Mrs. Adeyemi asked. I took a deep breath. When Fatima and her friends cornered me in the bathroom, I was scared. I thought they might try to hurt me again. So I turned on my phone's voice recorder. I recorded everything Fatima said. Fatima's face went pale. "You're bluffing," she said, but her voice was uncertain. With trembling hands, I opened the voice recorder app on my phone and pressed play. Fatima's voice filled the room, clear as day. "Of course I did, you idiot. Did you really think it was an accident?" Mrs. Adeyemi's eyes widened as she listened to the recording. Fatima slumped in her chair, all the fight gone out of her. When the recording finished, there was a long silence. Finally, Mrs. Adeyemi spoke, her voice heavy. "Fatima, these are very serious allegations. If what Amina says is true, you could be facing expulsion and criminal charges." Fatima burst into tears. "I'm sorry," she wailed. "I didn't mean for her to lose her eye. I just wanted to scare her." As I watched Fatima cry, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Part of me was glad to see her finally face consequences for her actions, but another part of me felt pity. Fatima had always seemed so confident, so untouchable. Now she looked small and scared. Mrs. Adeyemi sighed deeply. "Both of you, go home for today. Fatima, I'll be calling your parents and the police. We need to get to the bottom of this. Amina, I'm sorry for what you've been through. We'll make this right." As I left the office, my mind was spinning. Everything had changed so quickly. Would Fatima really be punished? Would people finally believe me? Zainab was waiting for me outside. Her eyes widened when she saw my disheveled state. "Amina, what happened? Are you okay?" I burst into tears, the events of the day finally catching up with me. Zainab hugged me tightly, not caring that I was getting her uniform dirty. "It's okay," she soothed. "Whatever happened, we'll face it together." Over the next few weeks, the whole story came out. The school took things very seriously. Mrs. Adeyemi called my parents, and the police came to the school to talk to me and Fatima. It was scary, but I knew I had to tell them the truth about what had happened. The police started an investigation, and they talked to everyone who had seen what happened. They asked questions in private so no one would feel pressured. Some of the students who were afraid of Fatima at first started to speak up. A few of Fatima's friends, worried about getting into trouble, finally told the truth. They admitted that Fatima had planned to hurt me that day on the football field. The teachers were shocked. Many of them didn't know how bad things had gotten between us. They promised to do better at stopping bullying in the future. Some students apologized to me for believing the rumors Fatima had spread, and others started treating me more kindly. Fatima was suspended first, and then, after more discussions, she was expelled from school. The police decided she needed to face consequences, so she was charged with a crime, even though she was still a kid. Her parents tried to use their money and influence to make it all go away, but the evidence was too strong. After it was all over, I felt a little bit of relief. I knew that what happened to me was finally being taken seriously, and that Fatima couldn't hurt me or anyone else anymore. The teachers reminded everyone that bullying would not be tolerated, and they started a new program to help students talk about their problems before things got out of hand. As for me, I became something of a hero at school. People who had avoided me before now wanted to be my friend. They called me brave for standing up to Fatima, but the attention made me uncomfortable. I didn't feel brave. I felt tired of being stared at, tired of being the center of attention, even if it was positive this time. Akin was amazing through it all. He stood by me, not caring what anyone else thought. One day, as we were walking home from school, he took my hand. "Amina," he said softly, "I know this has been hard for you, but I want you to know, I think you're the strongest person I've ever met and the most beautiful inside and out." I felt my cheeks grow warm, even with. I gestured to my glass eye. Akin smiled, "Especially with that. It's part of you, and I like every part of you." Then, right there on the street, he leaned in and kissed me. My first kiss. It was sweet and a little awkward, and absolutely perfect. As we continued walking hand in hand, I realized something. Losing my eye had been horrible. The pain, the fear, the bullying, it had all been so hard. But it had also made me stronger. It had shown me who my true friends were, and it had brought me closer to Akin. I'm not glad it happened. I still miss my real eye every day. But I've learned that life isn't about what happens to you. It's about how you deal with it. And I was dealing with it one day at a time, surrounded by people who cared about me. My name is Amina. I'm 15 years old. I go to Sunshine Secondary School in Lagos, and I have one eye. But that's not all I am. I'm a daughter, a friend, a girlfriend. I'm strong. I'm a survivor. And this is just the beginning of my story.